Pakir Jainulabdin Abdul Kalam was born on October 15, 1931, in the small island town of Rameswaram in Tamil Nadu, India. His home was a simple one, close to the sea, with narrow streets, sandy shores, and the sound of waves and temple bells filling the air. His father was a boat owner and imam at the local mosque, a man of deep faith and quiet wisdom. His mother was a caring, gentle woman who cooked for the family and often fed pilgrims and visitors who passed through the town. The Kalam family was not rich in money, but rich in values, honesty, discipline, hospitality, and respect for all religions. From a very young age, Abdul Kalam understood what it meant to live with little. The family sometimes struggled financially, especially as times changed and traditional boat work became less profitable. Yet, he never saw his parents complain. Instead, he watched them share whatever they had, whether it was food, a place to sleep, or kind words. This environment quietly shaped his character. He began to believe that true richness lies not in what you keep, but in what you give. In later years, when he would become famous, he often spoke fondly of his childhood home, where the doors were open to neighbors, friends, and strangers alike. As a boy, Kalam attended the local school in Rameswaram. He was not born a genius. In fact, he described himself as an average student. He struggled in some subjects at first, but what made him different was his curiosity and his willingness to work hard. He loved mathematics and science, and he had a special fascination with the sky. He often lay on the sand, looking up at the stars and wondering what lay beyond them. He listened to his teachers carefully and asked questions, not to show off, but because he genuinely wanted to understand how the world worked to help his family financially. Young Kalam started working while he was still in school. Every morning, before the sun rose fully, he would collect bundles of newspapers from the train station. The train would pass through Rameswaram, and newspapers would be thrown down onto the platform. Kalam would pick them up, arrange them, and then cycle through the town, delivering each one to its subscriber. It was tiring work. The early morning air was sometimes cold. The roads were dusty. The cycle was heavy. But he did it faithfully, day after day. Delivering newspapers might seem like a small job, but it taught him important lessons. He learned time management. He had to balance school and work. He learned responsibility. People trusted him to bring their morning news. He learned independence. He was earning his own money, making a contribution to his family income. Above all, he learned that no work is small if it is done with honesty. Many years later, when people called him the Missile Man or President Kalam, he still spoke proudly about his time as a newspaper boy, reminding students that humble beginnings are nothing to be ashamed of. One of the key influences in Kalam's life was his school teacher, Sivasubramania Iyer, who taught him science. One day, the teacher took the students to the seashore to explain how birds fly. He pointed to the wings, the shape, the air current, and the physics behind flight. The lesson lit a spark in Kalam's mind. For the first time, he seriously thought about becoming a scientist, perhaps even working with flying machines. After class, the teacher invited Abdul Kalam, a Muslim boy, to his home for a meal. When the teacher's wife hesitated to serve food to someone from another religion, the teacher gently corrected her and insisted that Kalam be treated with equal respect. This experience touched Kalam deeply. It showed him that science and humanity go together, and that prejudice can be challenged with quiet, firm courage. After completing his schooling in Rameswaram, Kalam moved away from home to continue his education. He studied at St. Joseph's College in Tiruchirappalli, where he earned a degree in physics. Leaving his family and island behind was not easy. He had grown up in a close-knit community. But he knew that to follow his dreams, he had to step into new places and face new challenges. At college, he continued to work hard, even when the subjects were difficult. He did not always get top marks, but he never allowed failure to become permanent. If he scored poorly in one test, he studied harder for the next, after finishing his degree in physics. Kalam realized that if he wanted to work with aircraft and flight, he needed to study engineering. He applied to the Madras Institute of Technology (MIT), one of the top engineering colleges in southern India, to study aeronautical engineering. Getting admission there required not only intelligence, but also money. The fees were higher than his family could easily afford. For a brief moment, it seemed his dream might end right there. But his sister, understanding how much this meant to him, sold some of her jewelry to help pay his tuition. With his family's sacrifice behind him, Kalam entered MIT with a deep sense of responsibility. He knew that he was not just studying for himself. He was carrying his family's hopes. At MIT, the academic work was intense. The instructors were strict and encouraged the students to push beyond mediocrity. Kalam sometimes felt overwhelmed, but he refused to give up. One day, a professor criticized his progress on a project and gave him a short deadline to improve it. Instead of being discouraged, Kalam locked himself in the lab and worked day and night. By the deadline, he had transformed the project, impressing the professor and his classmates. That moment gave him a new level of confidence. He realized that with effort, focus, and persistence, he could meet high expectations. After graduating as an aeronautical engineer, Kalam applied to join the Indian Air Force as a pilot. He went for the tests and interviews with excitement, hoping to fly high in the sky as he had dreamed since childhood. However, when the final list of selected candidates was announced, his name was not on it. He had failed to make it. For a young man with big dreams, this was a painful disappointment. He traveled to a spiritual center in Rishikesh, where a wise teacher advised him not to be defeated by one failure. "You are meant to touch the sky in a different way," the teacher suggested. This conversation helped Kalam to see that sometimes life closes one door only to open another. Soon after, he joined the Defense Research and Development Organization, DRDO, and later, the Indian Space Research Organization, ISRO. At ISRO, he became part of a small group of scientists helping India develop its own space program. The early days were full of setbacks. Rockets failed. Parts had to be transported on bicycles and bullock carts. There was not much money or advanced infrastructure. Yet Kalam and his colleagues did not lose heart. They believed that a nation as large and talented as India deserved its own place in space. They worked with low resources but high spirits. In the 1970s and 1980s, Kalam played a key role in developing India's satellite launch vehicles. He led the project for the SLV-3. She eventually succeeded in putting the Rohin satellite into orbit in 1980. The success was not instant. There were failed launches before that victory. After one major failure, Kalam and his team were heartbroken. They had worked for years only to see their rocket crash into the ocean. But instead of blaming them, their leader took responsibility. He faced the journalists and the public while telling the team to focus on learning from the failure. The next time, when the rocket succeeded, that same leader asked Kalam and the team to face the press and take the credit. This example of leadership deeply influenced Kalam's own style. Take blame when things go wrong. Share praise when things go right. As India's space program moved forward, Kalam's reputation as a visionary scientist grew. Later, he shifted from space to defense work, helping develop India's missile technology. Under his guidance, projects such as Agni and Prithvi became symbols of India's growing capability in defense. These achievements earned him the nickname Missile Man of India. He became a national icon, admired not just by scientists and soldiers, but by ordinary people who saw in him a simple man with extraordinary dedication. Despite his fame, he kept his lifestyle modest. He owned few possessions, lived simply, and often said that he did not think of money as a measure of success. In 1998, India conducted a series of nuclear tests in Pokhran. Kalam was one of the key scientific leaders behind the operation. The tests were controversial internationally, but within India many saw them as a statement of national strength and self-reliance. Kalam became even more famous, yet he stayed humble. When reporters surrounded him, he often shifted the attention to his team. He reminded everyone that no big project is the work of one man alone. It is the result of many minds and many hands working together quietly as his scientific career reached its peak. Something else was happening. Kalam was increasingly drawn to young people. He began giving more talks at schools and colleges where students listened to him with shining eyes. He did not speak like a distant scientist or stiff official. He spoke like a friendly teacher, telling stories from his childhood, explaining difficult science in simple words, and always urging them to dream big. He told them, "Dream is not that which you see while sleeping. It is something that does not let you sleep." For a generation of Indian students, he became people's scientist and later people's president. In 2002, a surprising event took place in Indian politics. The major political parties agreed to nominate Dr. A.P.J. Abdul Kalam as a candidate for the presidency of India. He was not a traditional politician. He had never run for election, and he did not belong to a political dynasty. But he had something rare: the respect of people across party lines and across social divisions. He was a Muslim in a majority Hindu country, yet he was loved by people of all religions. He was a scientist in a world of lawyers and career politicians, yet he was trusted to represent the nation. When he was elected as the 11th president of India, millions felt proud. The newspaper boy from Rameswaram had become the head of state as president. Kalam brought a new energy to the otherwise formal Rashtrapati Bhavan. He invited students, farmers, and ordinary citizens to visit. He traveled extensively across the country, meeting young people and listening to their dreams. In speeches, he did not focus on politics. He focused on development, science, and moral values. He spoke about a vision for India in 2020, a nation that would be economically strong, technologically advanced, and socially just. He saw education as the key, especially education that combined knowledge with character. Kalam refused to act like a distant king. He answered emails from students. He wrote books in simple language about his life and vision, such as Wings of Fire and Ignited Minds. He encouraged children to ask questions, to challenge old thinking, and to believe that their ideas mattered. His gentle smile, wild hair, and simple clothes made him seem less like a politician and more like a wise grandfather. Many people, especially children, started calling him Kalam Sir or A.P.J. Sir with affection after completing his term as president in 2007. Kalam returned to what he loved most: teaching and inspiring. He became a visiting professor at several universities and institutes. He spent his days traveling, giving lectures, and meeting students. He carried only a few bags, a laptop, and some books. He had no large personal property, no business empire. For him, the real joy was standing in front of a classroom, holding a microphone, and seeing curiosity in young eyes. He often reminded them that he was once a small boy selling newspapers in a tiny town, and that if he could rise to become a scientist and president, then they too could achieve great things. On July 27, 2015, Dr. Kalam was giving a lecture at the Indian Institute of Management in Shillong. He was doing what he loved, speaking to young people about a better future, when he suddenly collapsed on stage. Despite the efforts of doctors, he passed away that evening. News of his death spread quickly across India and around the world. People cried not only because a former president had died, but because they felt they had lost a beloved teacher and guide. Candlelight gatherings, special prayers, and emotional tributes poured in from students, scientists, soldiers, and citizens of all backgrounds. When we look back on Dr. A.P.J. Abdul Kalam's journey as a story of riches, we see a life that began in material modesty and reached the highest offices of science and state. He did not inherit big businesses or political influence. His capital came from hard work, curiosity, family support, and a deep desire to serve his country. The riches he collected were not expensive cars or mansions, but the millions of minds he touched and the dreams he ignited in young hearts. For your viewers, his life carries powerful messages. First, your starting point does not decide your ending. You can be a newspaper boy from a small island and still grow into a world-respected scientist and president. Second, failure is not the opposite of success. It is part of it. Kalam failed to become a pilot, saw rockets crash, and faced many disappointments. But each time he learned, adjusted, and moved forward. Third, real success is not measured only by what you build, but by what you give. He built missiles and rockets, but he also built hospitals, universities, and above all, belief in young people. Dr. Kalam's story is a story of riches where the richest treasure is a burning, humble, lifelong desire to learn and to serve. He showed that you can stand at the top of your field and still keep your feet on the ground, that you can have access to power and still choose simplicity, and that you can be deeply religious while respecting all other faiths. In every way, his life invites us to dream higher, work harder, and live more generously, no matter where we begin.